again, I came to Aho for the first time in, well, I came up here the first time just to help my father move in 1992. Okay, and but before I really really started thinking about what I wanted to write, I was living in Aho around 1995 on vacation, kind of like a seasonal visitor, a winter visitor. But I'm not really a winter visitor. I'm more of I had a job. In a sense, I came here accidentally. I was traveling as in a kind of sales field where I had to travel all the time, and it brought me down to Arizona, and it gave me some time to hang out in this area for a while and stay with my father. And I began thinking, I've got to start writing my novel, and I didn't know what novel I was going to write yet. This is something that had been nagging at me for a long time. Since I was a child, basically, I've always wanted to write. I want to write books. I was interested in Robert Louis Stevenson. I loved Moby Dick and Edgar Allan Poe, and all the classic novels, the children's books. And then I began having an interest in being a writer myself. And so, I began to put together an old newspaper that I used to sell around the neighborhood and stuff like that. But then I grew up and then still hadn't fulfilled my vision of writing a novel. I knew I wanted to do it. I had a lot of notes. I had short stories. Before I even started working on any novels at all, I had published about 20 articles, plus maybe hundreds of newspaper articles from my years as a newspaper reporter, which occurred back in the mid to late 1980s and the early 1990s. So I had done a lot of writing, but still that carrot on the stick was in front of me. Where's the novel? Where's the novel? I kept thinking about that. What novel should I write? That's the basic question. Some writers are born with that novel, and as soon as they can speak, I will write Moby Dick or something like that. They have this born vision of writing some novel, and then we get this great epic like Six and Seven, like Hugo's Les Miserables or Hunchback of Notre Dame, or whatever, or Tale of Two Cities or whatever. So, but I'm not like that. I'm more of someone who wants to be a writer, but I didn't really know how. I mean, I've had this ambition to write for a very long time, and yet it seems a kind of mystery to me. How do people write? How does it get done? You read a novel and it's incredible, and yet it's still, when I start to write the novel, I don't seem to be doing quite as well as the novel I just read. And I've always had that hanging over me and bothering me. So I began reading a lot of books on how to write, and it turns out that almost every book about how to write has a different view on how to write. So it becomes very confusing. What might work well for one person will work not so well for another. So I decided, well, maybe the best thing to do is to go to graduate writing school. So in the early 1990s, I tried that. I went off to Louisiana and worked with a Pulitzer Prize-winning author. It seemed like he had all the credentials. And but his writing was very, very deep and into very kind of depressing subjects that not quite what I wanted to get into. And again, I found that I had the same difficulty. He came up with okay, you want to know how to write? Listen, I'm going to give you in 5 minutes how to do it. And after 5 minutes, I was still wondering, is that really the best way to do it? Is that going to really work for me? So I had yet another point of view on how to write. So what happened next was I just decided to not pursue a writing career for the time being. I decided to pursue a teaching career because I had some experience teaching. I did some substitute teaching in high school in the early 1990s. And then I did something completely different, joined the military, part-time military, National Guard, and almost got sent off to Iraq in the early 1990s, but didn't. And for the next 4 years, I was doing that on a part-time basis, and that kind of took my focus off of the great American novel I was going to write. However, during that time, I did discover some happiness and satisfaction in teaching. I got a job teaching overseas. I did in South Korea, and after doing that, I discovered I really enjoyed being in a totally different environment, a very foreign environment like that. And don't ask me why, but I just did. And not that I really wanted to learn the language. I didn't learn foreign languages very well. I thought instead I was doing pretty well teaching English. And so I did that for a while and kind of got burned out on that. And around 1999, suddenly something I had dreamed about for a long time, which was getting basically a full acceptance and teaching assistantship at a university occurred, and that was at the University of Arizona. Out of the blue, suddenly they wanted to invite me into their MFA in creative writing program. And what was so ironic about that is I had sent out an application at the same time for an ESL degree program at the University of Arizona, because I wanted to continue teaching English as a second language. That's what ESL means, English as a second language. And instead of that, I got accepted to the other one I applied for just out of the blue. I thought, while I'm at it, let me apply for the MFA, the Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing program. And they accepted me. And they turned me down for the ESL program. So I was very confused. I thought, now wait a minute. I thought I was having a hard time learning how to be a writer. And now they want to accept me into the program? So I couldn't turn it down, though. Obviously, it was a great opportunity. If anyone knows anything about the University of Arizona's writing program, it's a tough program to get accepted into. It really is. It's one of the top 10 in the nation. So I couldn't turn it down. So I was off to Arizona, again back in Arizona, the University of Arizona, and again getting back into teaching, this time learning how to teach to first language learners, not second language learners of English. And once I completed that, I realized that I was able to continue on my writing project. And I didn't know it at the time, but even though I had majored in nonfiction creative writing, I had these books. I had been dabbling around with this character that was floating around my head called Jake McElroy. And I think it came from being down here in Arizona and just imagining this non-existent character who was based on a friend of mine named Larry Bowman. I don't know if I'm supposed to bring up real people or not, but he's a really good fellow. He's a Vietnam veteran. He always wore a cowboy hat. He was a private investigator. And I kept seeing Larry, just the way he carries himself and the way he's just about ready to stop somebody right there and let's see your ID, kind of fellow. Because he's looking out for the best interests of the town and protecting people from all harm and danger. So there's my hero, coming from somebody out of real life. But then as he developed, of course, I began to see that Jake McElroy didn't really look like my friend at all. So what you have when you develop a character is you take out different parts of different people and something from your imagination, something from yourself, something from movies, and they all get combined together and you come up with an imaginary character named Jake McElroy. So that's how that happened. So here's an irony for you. Irony is meaning something happens in the opposite way that you expected it to happen. I majored in creative writing, nonfiction, and I had put together a book of essays, which is called Into the Midst, which still hasn't been published yet. But a few pieces in that that project have been published, so I'm holding out that it will be published someday. Most of the book is about traveling on highways in America, a lot of it in Arizona. And so I have that done, but when I finished my project and I graduated from the University of Arizona, immediately Jake McElroy jumped out and said, now you're going to write about me. Okay, he sort of asserted himself. And I just couldn't put him down. I said, no way, I can't write fiction. I'm not supposed to be writing fiction. I went to school to write essays, right? But he wouldn't let me go. So this dictator jumped into my life and started telling me his story, and that's how that happened. So the next thing I know, I've got a novel that I didn't expect would happen, a mystery novel that I didn't expect I would write, because I've enjoyed mysteries in the past. I've read some Tony Hillerman, but I've also read a lot of my favorite author for a long time, Stephen King. And I've also read people like A.G. Guthrie, and one of my favorites, and also somebody who I like very much is Larry McMurtry. He runs a bookstore in Texas called Booked Up. And if you ever get a chance to go through Texas and you find Booked Up, you might even find Larry McMurtry there. But anyway, besides the point. So, Jake McElroy came to life. How did he come to life? Well, in a sense, it was a little bit conscious effort. I'm not saying that I sort of make it sound like I became obsessed by this character and sort of almost like a mental trance or kind of a double personality. He took over my life. It's not really quite that way. I was able to continue to be Bill Barrett and be myself. It doesn't really work that way in writing, you know. So when I say he sort of dictated to me, what happened was, when I got into this, what we call writing trance, I was able to let the character's voice come into my own. And so when I was writing, even though I was in full control of writing each sentence, and I knew where to put the punctuation and so forth, he was still basically the voice in my head. And that's a very, very lucky situation to be in for a writer, because it takes a lot of burden off you having to think about, well, okay, I've just written this chapter, and you have 5 or 6 characters, or how many characters you have in there, and they've done all these things. Now what are they going to do in the second chapter? In other words, by having a first-person, limited point-of-view narrator, I just have to listen to what he has to say and what he's going to do next, and he knows what he's going to do. Now, having said that, that doesn't relieve the author of the responsibility of being responsible, that is, being able to put together some kind of plot. Okay, so part of the time I was just writing and letting the author tell a story. The other part of the time I was thinking about, okay, what are we going to do next? What are we going to have Jake do next? And I had to work out some kind of outline. Another problem was, how do people really perceive and see this character? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? And somewhere in between. Well, if you have a hero, obviously, you're not going to call him a bad guy. But what is very important, and I think almost every novel where you have some kind of protagonist or hero, is that he's somehow identifiable or likable, or that you know, you don't want to see that hero die immediately. You want to see something achieved. You kind of have to be in that character's shoes, in a sense. You have to kind of be with him or her to get through the book. So I had to decide, well, you know, if Mr. McElby, the sheriff, is supposed to be this super clean, wonderful guy who doesn't have any problems, is that going to make him really likable or interesting? I think often, you know, when we see people that we don't see every angle of them, we almost see them as cutout figures. Okay, this can happen in movies too. You know there's something there in that person's background, but you don't see it, and so you feel like what you're really seeing is what's called a facade. Anyone remember the old Western movies where they, like in old Tucson studios, you might see it where the front was just the front of the building and back was absolutely nothing. That's called a facade. And characters can become that way too. People can become that way too. So I had to deal with this problem. How much do we reveal of Jake McElby? Pretty soon, the problem was solved by itself. Again, it just came back to what does he do on a daily basis?